You're listening to the Iterators of the Imperium.
Hi, I'm Miss, and I'm here with my co-host Ryan, and you're listening to the Iterators of the Imperium podcast, season 6, no less. And yes, this is the podcast in which Ryan is the expert on Warhammer 40k, and I am the noob trying to learn about the Warhammer universe. Also, I really want to say here in the beginning of this episode, we really want to hear from you guys, the listeners. If you have any questions for us, you can now leave comments on Spotify. And of course, you can also leave a comment on YouTube if you're that one or two people like watching from YouTube. But yeah, leave a comment on Spotify, guys. And yeah, Ryan, let's get into it. We are continuing from last episode.
Yes. Well, that is usually how these things go. We are kind of serialized here.
Oh yeah. I mean, more as like we this is like a topic from the last time. Like sometimes with the episode it is, a new topic, whatever.
Once in a while we mix off. Yeah. All right. Let's do this. Old man stretch, and then we'll get into it. All right. So we left off last time with Ahriman having completed the second rubric, try to fix the Legion, only for it to be disrupted by everyone in the dog turning up at the last second and getting in the way. And for it to then be stolen from him at like the last possible second by that arsehole Kineku, who I'm pretty sure died. But I don't think he ever comes up again in any storyline. But like they don't specifically say he died, but like he kind of accepts he's going to die if he does like take over the ritual. So I'm pretty sure Kineku's just dead and no one cares. Anywho, if he comes up again, I'll let you know. Like, I'll look into this specifically. I don't remember him ever coming up anywhere else, though. After all that goes down, they barely make it away from the planet alive. Their forces are pretty well, beaten and blooded after the big war that took place on, 8 sides on the planet of the Sorcerer and on Prospero. But the one upside to it all is we find out that Helio Isadores, one of the Rubricae, has returned to life. He's just a living guy now, which is good, because it means that something worked. Something about what Ahriman was trying to do did what it was supposed to. But there's also the issue of no one knows what the hell Kineku did with the ritual. Because, the Rubric is essentially godly power. You can use it to do whatever you want. You can give all birds in existence a third wing on their back for no goddamn reason if you want to. You just are a god briefly when you're the one controlling that ritual. So you could do whatever you want, but no one knows what the fuck he did with it. All they know is this one Rubricae has became a guy again, so something happened. I'm gonna be honest with you. I've already mentioned this to Mez, but for all the listeners, not a lot happens in the next section, right? It seems like a lot happens, not a lot actually happens. So we're going to cover this whole next section in one episode, rather than 2, because it's not really worth the effort to try and act like it's a better storyline than it is, right? Not a lot goes on here, it's all kind of irrelevant to a large degree, except for one kind of background part to it, which is what we're going to focus on it when we get to it. But we are going to run through the general storyline, because there's a progression to things, It also sets up stuff, outside of the Ahriman storyline. It's one of those ones where, a couple of storylines branch off from this point, rather than just continuing Ahriman's, So it's worth mentioning for the grand scheme of the whole universe of this thing. But it doesn't really affect Ahriman very much, is the thing. So a lot kind of happens, but between the last section and this one, right? And this part is where it gets really weird, and I say that knowing full well it's been really weird up until this point too, but it gets even weirder now, because the Eldar and the Necrons both get involved in Ahriman's storyline now.
Then?
Yeah, so you're like, alright, everyone's just having a go at this guy now, because until now it's been a wee sprinkling of Space Wolves, a lot of Inquisition, and basically other than that it was just problems he created. Now the Eldar are getting involved, and the Necron are getting involved, so things go sideways a little bit here, but you can kind of see why I'm saying a lot of it isn't necessarily relevant to Ahriman. because some of it is Necron storyline setting up, and some of it is just Harlequin crap, or Eldar crap, you know? So, you'll see when we get there. But between, you know, the return of Helio Isadores and now, where we're going to pick up here, there is something that's been happening with the Thousand Sons, right? So that randomly, Ahriman and all of his brothers, in perfect unison, feel this, like, heat come over them, right? And their vision starts to, like, turn to, like, pure white, or, like, red, or whatever, like, you know, like a heat, basically, right? And they don't know why this is happening, or what's causing it, or anything like that. But every time it happens, it becomes more intense, right? It becomes painful. They actually feel as if they are burning and stuff like that. And their vision starts to become like sunspots and stuff like that whenever it occurs. And again, they have no idea why any of this is happening, and everyone's really confused and kind of scared and pretty worried, which is understandable, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ahriman tells Caeticius to look into this. Caeticius is the Diabolist, the one that summons demons and shit. Because he can go talk to the fucking demons about it and find out what the fuck is going on. Because it's obviously some kind of psychic phenomenon, because it's every single one of the Thousand Sons at the same time. Like, that's not a coincidence. So Caeticius comes back with a name. Pyrodomon. Right? Apparently the demons say it is a metamorphosis in flame. Don't know what the fuck that's meant to mean. Change through fire, but they don't really... Like, demons are cryptic as shit, right? So he doesn't really get much more than that.
Yeah.
Right? And that's kind of all the information they get for a period, but this whole Pyrodomon thing keeps happening, right? They keep burning, like feeling this random burning and their vision going white and all this kind of stuff, randomly, and it keeps getting more and more frequent. And more intense every time. And eventually, there is a point where, after it passes, they find out that this dude, whose name was Iskidiades, one of the sorcerers of Thousand Sons, has turned into a Rubric Marine. He's now just dust in his armor. So, everyone starts to freak out a bit more, because they're like, every time this happens now, one of us turns into a fucking Rubric. Or Rubricae. That's not good. Because we don't know why it's happening. This is profoundly bad. So Ahriman is obviously forced to try and explain it to his guys what the fuck is going on. And as best he can explain, he thinks it's like a result of the second Rubric. Like, because it went wrong. You know, because the ritual was disrupted by everyone attacking, and then some other arsehole took over at the last minute. He thinks that the ritual didn't, like, it wasn't completed properly, right? An important thing to keep in mind that no one mentions is that the first ritual didn't end, right? Like, they didn't complete the ritual and that was it, and Ahriman had fucked everyone over, right? It's that they all almost died and Magnus had to step in and forcibly stop the ritual, right? No one did that this time. So, the Rubric is still going, like, running away with its cell as, like, you know, like, I don't know, I guess some kind of reactor. If it starts to, like, power or overpower itself, it just goes faster and faster and faster until it explodes. Right? It's kind of doing that. The ritual's still going on, even though it's already been used to do something. Yes. And that's what Ahriman thinks is causing people to gradually burn away into Rubricae. It's this fact that the second Rubric is still running in the background of the universe.
Yeah.
So, that's the thing they're dealing with, right? All of that said, this is what progresses the plot line, right? This is when we get into the actual storyline, because this has all started happening between the events of these two major sections, and they kind of just get like a half-hearted explanation out of it. So the real story picks up with Ahriman trying to, you know, figure a way out of this, right? And this kicks off with Ahriman and his guys hunting down a scavenger ship. They're basically like human pirates that ransack old wrecked ships and stuff like that and sell the parts, right? Or anything they find inside. And as these guys are returning from ransacking a vessel where they found some crazy alien artifact, it's like a alien in a stasis kind of thing, right? Like, that thing will sell for a lot of money, or the Inquisition will murder us all, one or the other, right? But luckily, Ahriman and his dudes board their ship, murder them all, and steal the alien in the sarcophagus thing before they can sell it. So, Ahriman, obviously, the whole reason he was doing all this because he wants this artifact, he wants this alien, right? And what it is, it's an alien holding this little sphere thing, right? Little technological bubble, basically. And they take it back on board their actual ships, and they take it to what is essentially some kind of research lab. They get the guy out of the stasis and chain him to a bench, like to a surgical table, basically, before he wakes up. And they take the little bauble out of his hand and put it on a table opposite him. And when he wakes up, they start to interrogate him, this alien. And the alien pretty quickly figures out their language, right? And I'm going to save a bit of hassle here and explain to you, it's a Necron, right? So this is like a big robot dude, is the way to look at this, right? And they were obviously incredibly advanced with technology, but had no warp connection at all. So the thing lying on the table opposite him was obviously very important to him, because he was carrying it when he was put in stasis. So he quickly figures out their language, and they start talking, and they get a name out of him. His name's Setek, which they all have very old school Egyptian names, the Necron. So Setek, good name. And they've decided that Setek is some kind of like techno-vizier, right? So obviously all their people were incredibly advanced technology, and it was pretty common to have like a weirdly wizardy sounding title when you were actually just like a technomancer. So they had ones that like could control the weather and things like that, but it was always just done with technology. But it looked like magic. So they figure he's one of these that did some kind of magic with technology, right? So they think he's just like a really middling guy in the Necron hierarchy, right? It's just some random dude who's been abandoned into space in a little storage pod. Yeah, basically, but not that cool or important. So the Necron kind of, they all talk for a bit, and they're trying to get information out of the Necron's trying to get information out of them, and then it breaks free from its restraints, grabs the little bauble thing off the table opposite them, and then is immediately waking up on the bench again, chained up, and the conversation runs through again, exactly the same. And he's like, what the fuck just happened? Because the little sphere thing that's sitting on the table that he was holding is a chronometron, it's called. It's a little device that allows you to time travel, right? But it doesn't just, like, reset, or it doesn't necessarily just move you through time. It can. But it can also, like, shift time for all of existence backwards. Or forwards, I guess, as well. And it doesn't do it with magic. It's purely technology, which is nonsense. But when he activated it, it's just put him back to being on the bench. So he has to talk to them again while he breaks free and then grab it again. And this time he recalibrates it a little bit to do something different, right? And when he activates it, same thing, wakes up on the bench again. He's like, alright, this device is obviously acting up a wee bit because it's been in stasis for Christ knows how long, right? And this goes over and over and over, this little time loop, and the guy breaking free and trying to adjust the settings on this orb as he has the same conversation with Ahriman and Ignis over and over and over again. And eventually, one of them says something different, and he's like, wait a minute, that's not what you say there. You're not following the fucking script. And he realizes all of a sudden that they've been fucking with him the whole time. Ahriman set up like this weird like ritual for the room so that if he breaks free and grabs the sphere, when he activates it, time resets. He's not using the sphere. It's Ahriman's ritual that's reversing time over and over again. This whole time, they've been pretending to have the same conversation with him, as if they don't know what's going on. But they're aware every time time resets, and so is he. So
Tough.
they've just been fucking with him the whole time to see what he can do.
Exactly, dude. That's like some sick experiment.
That's it. They're just tormenting the guy. But now that obviously they all know what's going on, and he's realised they're a lot smarter than he thought they were, because they thought, like, the Necrons think humans are monkeys, right? Like, they think we're, like, totally unevolved creatures. So, he's kind of clocked, alright, these ones are a little bit more intelligent than I've given them credit for. So he starts to take them a bit more seriously, and they get to a point where they're actually, like, bargaining, right? Because he knows he can't get free from this, like, magical mechanism he's trapped in. He needs them to let him out. So they come to an agreement, right? Setek explains that the king of his dynasty, back in their day when they were a thing, had invented a much grander scale version of the chronometron. So rather than just controlling time in a really limited space, it could do all time that's ever existed ever. Right? Pretty big deal. It's called the key of infinity, they call it. So that's obviously what Ahriman wants, because then he can, go back in time and stop the fucking Rubric and stuff like that. Do whatever he needs to do. So he's like, alright, want that. What do you want in return? He's like, I don't know, freedom, I guess? Alright, fine, I guess we'll free you if you get us the thing. So now they're going to have to go on a big journey back to Setek's homeworld to get this, key of infinity. And they just keep Setek as a prisoner until they get there. Now, there's like a middle part here, which is the journey, which, to get there, they're going to have to go through the webway, which is obviously the whole Eldar thing, right? The tunnels through the warp kind of stuff. We've not mentioned the webway in like 3 seasons. What a weird concept. We talked about that all the time at the start. It just came up every like 5 minutes for the first 3 seasons. Just haven't mentioned it since. Weird. They take their fleet of ships into the webway. This guy's still a prisoner. And while they're in the webway, shit kind of goes sideways big time, right? First thing is, Setek manages to get a little Scaraby-Doo onto Sylvanus, the Navigator, so he can see, or even though he's imprisoned, he can see the path of the webway through the Navigator, and his plan is that he's going to try and, fuck with their journey a bit. Right? So within the webway, there is a canoptic swarm, which is just a little swarm of these beetle scarab things, right? And if he can get close enough to this swarm, he can send it on ahead and have it wake up all the defenses of his homeworld for when they get there, and he can turn the tides on Ahriman and all those guys as soon as they arrive. So he needs to, guide their fleet to this swarm so that he can give them a command, because he needs to be close enough to do it. But to do that, he'll kind of need a bit of a distraction, because they're going to notice if they suddenly bank a hard left in the webway when they were supposed to be going straight, right? Luckily, for what is apparently no reason, a bunch of Harlequins turn up and attack their ship, like the fleet of Ahriman's ships, and just cause absolute havoc and chaos and kill a bunch of their people. Just for the record, Harlequins. Really annoying Eldari that speak in riddles. That's the gist. But they're all about fate. They create fate. They facilitate destiny. So a lot of what they do comes off as really pointless and unnecessary, but it's like, but actually I left that door unlocked while we were there murdering everyone that didn't matter. And with that door unlocked, this other crazy shit will happen in a million years. Like, it's always shit like that, right? It's just totally, it all seems totally irrelevant at the time, but in the grand scheme, it leads to something down the line that needs to happen.
Unnecessary and annoying, but important, I guess.
That's it. Yeah, there are really frustrating people, okay? Anything to do with the Harlequins is just profoundly frustrating to deal with. So, luckily, these guys were a pretty solid distraction for Setek. Also, amongst all the fighting and everything like that, Ahriman's ship is separated from the rest of the fleet and crashes into, an old derelict ship that's also just abandoned in the webway. Whole thing. Eventually, they deal with the Harlequins and get back to their fleet. all kind of group up again. I think like 5 ships are just lost in the webway, just never to be seen again. They've either gotten lost somewhere and they're never going to get back out, they found another way out and ended up in the arse crack of nowhere, or they died. It's one of them, no one really cares. But they lost 5 ships worth of guys and just moved on with their lives. Out of this whole thing, Setek did not manage to redirect them to the Canoptic Swarm. So he doesn't manage to get an alert ahead of them, right? But when they get out of the webway and they arrive at his world, they send down, land their ships to get people onto the actual planet. And they all start marching out. Setek, still a prisoner, surrounded by Rubricae as, honor guard, just keeping him steady. You know the way that, when they're taking a death row inmate, they have him, chained at the wrists and legs and then chained to, 4 guards.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of do that to him with Rubricae. He's got to walk in the middle of this chain gang of, automatons ready to gun him down if he sneezes. And when they arrive on the planet, Setek realizes that... Right, so this is a tomb world, right? His entire, dynasty is imprisoned on this world. But they aren't, in their tombs the same way that most tomb worlds are. Most tomb worlds were, stasis, right? So it was just, we'll wake up at this amount of time in the future and take over the galaxy once all the actual threats are gone. But this world was a prison more than a tomb. They didn't get in voluntarily. Other Necrons put them into this world and, put a little, kind of stasis thing around the planet, basically, or around their facility as a prison. So they've been awake this whole time, but unable to escape. The reason is because of the Key of Infinity, because fucking with time on that scale was illegal even by Necron standards. Which is fair. So when they get there, Setek realizes that a bunch of the systems are still active, but they're maintenance systems to make sure the thing doesn't break down and free them at some point by accident. But he can control the maintenance systems to reactivate everything. And all he kind of does is realize that the Guardian system, so the defenses for this facility, are gonna activate no matter what he does. He can't stop them because they're automated. But he can delay them. So he sets it up to delay them because he wants to really lure them into the trap before it springs. If they walk in the front door and immediately get shot at, not really a surprise, Yeah. He wants to wait until they're halfway through and then they're surrounded when the defenses activate. So, a bunch of their guys are left on the surface of the planet. Just, keep the ship safe and stuff like that so we can escape if we need to. And Ahriman, Ignis, and a guy called Kiyu and stuff like that, a few other people all head inside with Setek. Obviously, they take a bunch of the Rubricae with them, because they're basically war automatons. Why the fuck wouldn't you? And they head inside. And once inside, there's a bit of stuff goes on here. I should explain. Setek is not a techno-vizier, as they called him. He's actually the leader of the dynasty of Hyksos. He ruled this entire clan. He's the one that created the Key of Infinity, and he's the reason that his entire clan his entire dynasty was imprisoned. They just let him escape at the last minute. So that's not great. Yeah, but as they travel further inside the facility, they end up in this little pocket dimension that the people are imprisoned in, and Ahriman meets their king on his throne. And the king explains a bit about their past and how they ended up imprisoned, and obviously this is when they reveal the guy on the throne is not the king, he just looks a bit like Setek, and pretended to be Setek so that they could help Setek escape, so their actual king wasn't imprisoned, and he could come back later on and free them. So, the guy they've had standing next to them this whole time that they thought was just an underling is actually the ruler of this entire dynasty. Which is pretty bad, because he can free them all now. So, the whole thing of them being locked up starts to fade away, and the guys on the surface start getting attacked by Necron defenders, and, ships start to rise out of the planet and stuff. It's not looking great. Necrons are back in play here. obviously this revelation leads to Ahriman and Ignis fighting with Setek and the other Necrons that are there. Setek's the main one. He's the real threat here. And the whole thing kind of culminates in a little, like, time loop battle again, where Ahriman keeps reliving his own death over and over. It only really ends, I think at some point he realizes what's happening and sets up a thing so that he'll keep his memories, and ends up finding a way out of it, which is basically he dodges an attack, stabs Setek, and then sets him on fire. Whole thing. It's not really worth going into the fight, it's not all that impressive, but time loop, stab, flames. Setek's dead. Obviously, his whole thing is being able to control time, so he's gonna come back at some point. Like, he's not dead. Setek is gonna come back, but for the moment, he's fucking gone. So, Ahriman and Ignis take the chance to fucking bail, because fuck this, we just woke up an entire Necron empire. We're not winning this fight, let's get the fuck out of here. We're also not getting the Key of Infinity, clearly. Like, that's not a thing that's happening. Right? The only thing we can do now is try to get out of here and live. That's it. It's the only option we've got. So, Ahriman and Ignis start running back through the whole Necron facility. They meet up with Kiryu on the way and all his Rubricae, and they continue running. Until Ignis just suddenly stops, and they're like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Keep fucking running. And Ignis just screams as the heat of the Pyrodomon encompasses his entire body. His vision turns to flames, and he tries to speak, but the only noise that comes out is the sound of roaring flames. And he is reduced to a Rubricae. So Ignis just turns into a Rubricae right then and there as they're running out of this place. Now, I want to make it clear, the Necron side of this story is basically irrelevant. Now, like, Setek and his dynasty are back in play, but that's kind of it. That doesn't really affect Ahriman very much, you know what I mean? He's going to leave this planet and never see any of these fuckers ever again. Right? There is a side story here, which is the bit that I was explaining was very important. Right? And we're going to go to it now. So, in the background to, Ahriman and Setek going into this facility and, the battle now taking place on the planet, all that. In the background to all this, right? Caduceus has teamed up with Helio Isadores to try and help Helio regain his memories. Because when he came back, he had no memories at all, other than, like, his name and the blinding light of the Rubric, like, burning him the first time. He also has, like, no ability to retain new memories. It's like his mind just cannot have a memory. So even if you meet him and he's like, who are you? And you're like, oh, I'm Ahriman. And he's like, cool. If you walk out the room, walk back in, he's going to be like, who the fuck are you? Right? So Caduceus is like, alright, we need to get him back up to speed. So, you know how Ahriman has the whole Mind Palace thing? They do the same thing with Helio, where Caduceus goes into his mind, and the two of them wander through his mind. And stuff is still there, right? But they're kind of using Caduceus' memories to, like, prompt his. That's why they need the two of them, right? So Caduceus is, like, filling in the blanks with his memories and stuff like that. And they end up at the memory of the battles for Prospero when the Space Wolves attacked. And it's kind of like, while they're walking through it, it's kind of like someone's freeze-framed it, like they've paused the video, because it's all just stopped mid-battle as these two walk through the memory of it, which is really weird. And they end up, like, at a point where they see Ignis when he was fighting on that planet. And they kind of go up to him, and Helio doesn't remember Ignis, right? He has no idea who the fuck this guy is. And he wants to remember Ignis, though, is the thing, right? He doesn't remember him, but he wants to, so he reaches out and he touches Ignis. Like, the memory of him, that is, right? And as he does, the memory kind of starts playing again, so the battle kicks off again, everyone starts moving, the Space Wolves screaming, people are shooting magic out their arse, whatever. And when Helio turns back to Caduceus, his eyes are now glowing like bright red. And Caduceus is suddenly like, well, that took a fucking sinister turn. What the fuck, dude? And Helio now remembers the battle. which is weird, because he was there. He now remembers being there for the battle. So his memories have came back a bit, which is strange. Something about touching the memory of Ignis has brought part of it back to him. And then the whole thing kind of pauses again as he and Ctesias talk. And Ctesias explains to him that some of their brothers died in that battle, some of them died in the Rubric, and some of them survived both. And Helio doesn't remember Ignis surviving both of those things. Helio begins to explain what he does remember, and he reaches out to touch the memory of Ignis again. And he explains that he remembers Ignis having the potential power enough to save all of his brothers, but for all of that, he was still too weak, that he couldn't save anyone. And Ctesias is getting more and more agitated as Helio is reaching out to touch Ignis again, saying all this really ominous shit. Ctesias is like, wait, mate, stop. Don't fucking touch it. Stop. As they're getting closer and closer. He's like, shit is good. Like, this isn't good. Like, this guy's fucking, he's doing something crazy here. I don't like this. Ctesias is just freaking the fuck out watching this. And Helio says that he remembers light and darkness falling, and the light coming from his eyes starts to grow and grow until he touches the memory of Ignis again and says, I remember all that was, and all is dust. And that is the moment that Ignis undergoes the Rubric and turns to dust in his armor. And the memory of Ignis that you just touched burns away like tissue paper. But what the fuck? So Ctesias, of course, sees the memory burn and, realizes the change in Helio here and sees, the difference, or realizes the truth in this moment when he sees this happen. Helio is the Pyrodomon. He is the thing that's been, burning all of their brothers one by one. So Helio starts to explain, because he seems to have a bit more kind of sense about him now. He seems to just be a conscious creature now. So he starts to explain now that he's been prompted by Ctesias. And he explains what's really going on. It's not a fault of the second rubric. It's just the rubric at all. It's all of it. As soon as the first rubric was initially cast, it became like a fixed point in the warp. It always existed. Once it had been cast the first time, it had always been there and always will be there. It just becomes a fact of existence. The sheer power involved in it, that godly power, it doesn't go away. And it never, started beginning. It just always existed. From the beginning of time. Which is dangerous. It's a weird thing. And that whole concept also links all of the Thousand Sons together, because the Rubric does do that. That's the thing we've mentioned before. It links every one of them together. But the second Rubric didn't change anything. All it did was, focus it to one point, basically. Because, again, you're interacting with this, godly power you spread through all of existence. And it kind of just, funnels it to one point. It gives it, a focus point. And it took the embodiment of one of the Fallen that had already taken, Helio Isadores. So, it wasn't Helio that returned, it was just his body turned back into a person rather than dust. It is the Rubric. The godly power made manifest is a guy. It's a really weird concept. You might imagine that after explaining this like a Bond villain, Helio does not then chill the fuck out and act like a perfectly reasonable guy. He kind of goes a bit nuts. Yeah, it just sounds like what you'd expect,
Yeah.
Yeah. So the light around Helio starts to glow brighter and brighter, and flames start to spawn from him and stuff like that as he starts to go, a bit more chaotic and a bit more nuts. He does explain, or actually no, Ctesias kind of realizes that it's whenever he remembers someone, that's when they burn. So it was him remembering Ignis was the thing that burned Ignis. It's like calling attention to it from the power of this ritual, basically. It's like, as soon as it knows who it's meant to affect, it just immediately takes them. So, not great. And, firestorm starts to erupt from Helio as he gets more and more nuts. And all at once, in the real world where the whole battle with the Necrons is taking place, all at once, every Thousand Sun starts to feel the heat of the Pyrodomon come over them, but worse than ever. They're blinded by this firestorm of light in their eyes. They feel like they're burning. Every one of them thinks this is the moment that they're claimed by the Rubric and turned to Rubric Marine. And Ctesias starts to feel it too, but he's still in this mindscape with Helio. So he starts trying to talk him down. He's like, dude, chill the fuck out. You don't want to do this. But Helio is adamant that he is the will of the Rubric made manifest. And that he's the salvation for the Legion, finally putting an end to their suffering and all this kind of stuff. And as Ctesias starts to burn more and more, he starts to lose his memories. He forgets everything but his name, basically. And even then he starts to doubt it's even his name, even though all I can think is Ctesias. He's like, it's a name, I don't know that it's fucking mine. But among the kind of firestorm, Ctesias finds this little moment of clarity, right? And it might be caused by some outside source. It might have been Magnus's intervention, or it might have been one of the Chaos Gods' intervention, or it could have been anything. But he finds this little moment of clarity among the burning and the screaming of fire and all this kind of stuff. And what he realizes is an incredible thing that any reader would have figured out by this stage in any of the fucking 40k books about the Thousand Sons, is that just like all the other Thousand Sons, Helio is a pretentious, arrogant, pompous arsehole. Right? This is the biggest curse of the Thousand Sons. It's not that they turn into monsters if they're in the warp for too long, or that they're all cursed with sorceress powers in a galaxy they hate sorcerers, or anything like that. It's that every one of them thinks that they are the be-all, end-all of life and death. They all think they're better than everyone. They're just narcissists.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah. So, because Magnus had thought he knew better than the fucking Emperor. Didn't. Ahriman thought he was the only one that could fix the Legion. He couldn't. Ahriman did that again. Still fucking wrong. And now Helio thinks he alone is the salvation to the Legion. Ctesias is just like, man, you're a fucking idiot. Because the thing that I've realized that you clearly haven't realized is that your ability to do any of this shit is based entirely on feeding off of my memories. Because without my memories, you're just a fucking sack of meat. You don't even know his own name. You can't remember shit, so you can't burn shit without my memories. So as Helio goes for him, Ctesias basically rips his fucking memories out of this mindscape that they're in. And Ahriman wakes up on the floor of the Necron facility shortly after, not a Rubricae. So Helio ripping his memories out of Ctesias ripping his memories out of Helio's mind actually seems to have deprived him of his ability to, Rubricate everyone at once. So Ahriman wakes up on the, floor of the Necron facility. Ignis is still a Rubricae, by the way. He just is one of them now. That's the thing. And he gathers up his people. So he, calls up the Rubricae Ignis to follow him, gets Kiyu off the ground, and they charge back out of the place, get back to the surface, gather up their guys, and head the fuck back to their ships. Right. On the ships, Ctesias wakes up on the floor of the chamber he was doing this whole mind thing with Helio in, and he's pretty fucked up, because, his whole fucking soul was in Helio's mind and almost got set on fire, so he's a bit fucked up and exhausted and stuff. But he wakes up to the sound of someone kicking his door in. Because in the background to all of this, the Harlequins came back and sabotaged their ships and started murdering a bunch of their crew. So one of them's just kicked in Ctesias' door to murder him. Because apparently he's involved in some big, greater, destiny thing. He needs to die. So one of their Harlequin assassins comes to murder Caduceus while he's all exhausted and shit. Luckily, the Eldar are all pretentious arseholes, so it's really easy to keep them talking. So Caduceus just keeps them talking long enough for, I think, is it Leonidas? It's one of the other fucking thousands on sorcerers. Basically turns up at the doorway, shoots the fucker with lightning, and in the moment of distraction, Caduceus is able to summon a demon to tear the Harlequin apart. So, Harlequin is dealt with pretty handily, and Caduceus survives after being poisoned a little bit. But he does survive. And the whole aftermath of everything, once everyone's, back on board the fleet and everything like that, is that Ahriman's fleet just rapidly dives into the warp because the Necron ships are coming, and that's not a fight they win. No. And the kind of final aftermath of the whole thing is that Helio has returned back to this state of basically being a blank slate with no memories or ability to, create or gain new memories. So, yet again, we're leaving off, but Ahriman not really knowing what to do, but things are even worse than they were when he started. So, yeah, it's not great. That's kind of the whole fourth section of this. So there's one more kind of major section to Ahriman's storyline that we're going to go through. Yeah, it just kind of gets worse and worse.
Yes.
Because, now he doesn't even know what to do next. Because, if he had got the Key of Infinity, he probably could have went back and stopped them from doing the Rubric in the first place or something like that. There's a lot of options he would have had if he would have had total power over time and existence. But without that, all he's done is unleash an army of Necrons onto the galaxy and then fucked off away from them so that someone else can deal with them. And just has a lot less of his guys on side now. There is quite a funny moment. He goes to talk to Caduceus at the end of it all, and they're talking about everything that's happened, and Ahriman's like, we're gonna save Ignis, we're gonna bring him back, and Caduceus is like, how's that worked out for you so far? This will be your fifth try at this, and all that's happened until then is more people have died. So, and Ahriman's like, what, have you stopped believing in our goal? And Caduceus is like, man, I never believed in our goal. I never thought for a second we were gonna fucking fix anything. It's just, our options are try to fix it and fail, or definitely die. So I'm obviously gonna try. At least I'm doing something until then. So, yeah, not great for Ahriman at the moment. It's never really been great for Ahriman, but
He can't catch a break, really.
nah. But the worst thing is, it's all his own fault.
Not, but still.
Yeah, I feel bad for him, but he's doing all this to himself.
I mean, yeah, but still.
Yeah. So, we've got one last section, which I think will be a two-parter, so probably 2 more episodes of this season.
Right.
Yeah, me too. Would you like to round us out, then?
I sure can do. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Iterators of the Imperium podcast. Tune in next week to hear if Ahriman can finally catch a break. Spoiler alert. No, I'm not a spoiler. But yeah, it's been me, Mess and Ryan. I will catch you in the next one. Take care and peace.
Bye.